Hello, and welcome to the Argyle HR Leadership Forum. My name is Brittany Sullivan with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have some important information to share with you, and then we will turn the floor over to our esteemed opening keynote speaker. First, we would like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, DDI. Our partner is committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booth from the main agenda page, which includes complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. We also welcome you to stay socially connected during today's event. For those of you who are active tweeters, please use the hashtag ArgyleDigital and follow us on Twitter at ArgyleExecForum. Also be sure to follow Argyle on LinkedIn for special announcements. I would also like to take a moment to touch on our content neutrality policy, which we have curated based on the feedback we've received over the years from our members. We have worked closely with our speaking faculty to ensure that you receive a set of balanced and neutral viewpoints during the session today, and we truly appreciate our members' support of this policy. Finally, and most importantly, we would love to hear from you. So during each session, we encourage you to submit your questions and comments in the Q&A box on your screen. Following each presentation, we have set aside time for our speakers to weigh in on your questions. Thank you again for joining us. Now let's get started. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Tati Goldberg, Head of HR, Unilever Prestige at Unilever. We're excited to have Tati with us for her opening keynote titled, Sizing Up HR, Investing in HR Fundamentals to Match Business Maturity and Size. Welcome, Tati, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the very kind introduction. The very idea that anyone would get any credit for listening to me, it's very puzzling, but I appreciate the very kind introduction. If you can get started with my slides, please. Let me tell you a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Brazil. That's where I'm from. That's where I just came from a lovely holiday a few days ago. That's where I got my education as well. And I started with Unilever as an intern. So I started in this company very, very early on, practically a child. And I have changed roles quite a lot in my career. You see that as a theme. I've done almost 10 years in Unilever in Brazil, from the internship onwards, changing jobs quite a lot. And within HR specialties, I also moved a lot. I've done roles that we currently would call business partnering roles or business facing roles. I've done expertise roles like talent management specific or performance management specific. I've worked in training or learning and development, as we call it. I rotated a lot, basically. In 2011, I packed up my bags, signed up for a master's degree in organizational psychology in New York, which I totally loved, fell in love with the city, kind of like stumped and said, I don't want to go back to Brazil at this point in my life. I really like being here, and Unilever was kind enough to bring me back to Unilever at that point. That experience was a really fascinating experience to me. It taught me a lot. It was a little bit of a baptism by fire into the ethos of working in the United States. And it's quite surprising because I was working for the same company, but it couldn't be more different, I think, working for this very same company, which is a very kind, high values, really friendly company in Brazil versus the US. So from a cultural awareness and personal growth perspective, it was a really, really amazing experience for me. I've done that for about 7 years, also rotating around quite a lot. And then I came to the UK, which is going to be almost 3 years ago now. And that has been yet another very interesting experience because I was welcomed by the pandemic, basically. I arrived here about 2.5 weeks before the first lockdown. I've done only 2 roles since I arrived, but my current role, which is why we're here today, is that I had a very special division for Unilever, which is called Unilever Prestige. Unilever Prestige is the amalgamation of 9 independent, non-integrated brands. They're all in beauty luxury. So you would never know that these brands are a part of Unilever. And we have, we're approaching 3,000 employees anytime soon, probably at some point this year. The brands are sold in 20 countries, and we have employees based out of 10 different countries. So it's a highly complex business, very different than the Unilever you would have known. And And if you don't know, you do know, it's going to be in your bathroom somewhere. You will find something from Dove, or from Tresemme, or soup in your kitchen from Knorr, or mayo in your fridge from Hellmann's. That's all Unilever. But that's all very different on how does it get made, how does it get sold, how does it get to your hands from anything in prestige beauty or luxury beauty. So it's a very, very particular independent side of the business. That's all important to say, because if you go to the next slide, I wanted to explain to you a little bit, what perspective am I coming from? I spent the first 18 years of my career working for a very large company. And for those of you who worked in very large companies or have worked, you know, it's a little bit like eating an elephant. You work in different pieces of the business. You learn about a particular function and you go in depth in that function. You learn about a particular country and your business partner in that country. But you really only the very top job eats the whole elephant at once. And that's how I spend most of my life getting educated on, like learning about in-depth different parts of the business, different countries, different functions, or even different expertises within HR. And in the last 2 years, it has been very different. It has been about all this like 9 very fast animals that are very lean, very quick, very adaptable. But also they're running all in these different directions. And sometimes it feels like all the scats are going at a different pace. They're different styles, they're different business models even. So it has been really a reality shock between large company and small company, because while they're all owned by a large company, they all operate as small companies. So it's been a great learning experience for me. But it's been a little bit of a cultural shock trying to adjust my value system and how I see things from a large company perspective. So Brittany thought you might be interested, and I hope she was right, and I apologize if she wasn't, to compare those perspectives and what I've been learning about managing the smaller companies from an HR perspective would be interesting to share with you. So if you go to the next one, I wanted to talk a little bit about my lens when I'm talking to the HR leaders of each one of these companies about should they invest in something, should they not invest in something? Because the infrastructure in this businesses is not a large company infrastructure. Like some of them are doing a lot of stuff in Excel, some of them are doing a lot of stuff manually, some of them are just starting to either invest in their first processes and systems or now reinvest in better things. And working for a large company, I always had a lens about functional excellence. What is the best possible thing I can have? Best being defined either as the better quality or the lower cost or a mix of both. And in these companies, a lot of the discussions that we have is like, what is the capability I need the most to fuel the growth of the company? So what actually paves the way for the company to grow faster so I can then invest in even more capabilities going forward. And if you click again, it's not necessarily about one being better than the other. I don't want to imply any judgment call on these things. It's just that different realities will really require different things. And sometimes you're going to use a mix of both. But here I use more on the growth capability one, because the more you unlock growth, the more fuel you're going to give yourself to invest for the future, including in more HR capabilities. So if you go to the next one, I want to give you I'm just going to go to 4 parallel examples. So I started in a job, and my going in belief that I've been told, and I grew up to believe, that all your HR fundamentals should be automated. Like your payroll should be automated, people should be able to self-enroll in benefits, all of those things that are very fundamental about employee payment, benefits, like the day-to-day stuff should all be automated. I don't have to detail, you kind of instinctively know what I'm talking about. And what I've come to learn in the last 2 years is that while obviously taking some of that burden off of HR is great for the HR team, and it does avoid a lot of manual mistakes and a lot of time consumed in those things, you really have to stop to think, does it help the company be successful? Is this what I need right now? And what's interesting is that a lot of times I'm on the buyer side. I'm looking at companies to acquire. And it was quite shocking to me to see at first that a lot of the stuff wasn't automated. Sometimes we buy companies and they don't have a recruitment system, and they are doing payroll kind of by hand, so to speak. And then I started to reflect on why doesn't the seller think this was a valuable thing to invest on? And the reality is I don't need it to buy. A lot of the buyers have that infrastructure. They can loop in the companies and what do they have. And to be even more fundamental than that, they're just too busy growing. They're just doing the things that are more required to set the company for growth. For example, hiring the right people is actually more important than automating how they get paid because they're growing very fast, which is quite a surprise to me and a good learning. The other things that I came to observe is that sometimes in these companies where there's low automation, you get a lot of flexibility. So just to like make a cheeky comparison, if you work for a large company, very often you have very specific hire dates. You hire somebody on the 1st of the month, on the 15th of the month, they have a set onboarding date. If you do anything off process, the person doesn't get a computer on time, doesn't get their email on time. In a company where everything is manual, you could basically do whatever you need to do for the person to start on the day they need to start, for the company to get the person they need in the day that they need. So you get a lot of flexibility with it. Yes, it's a lot of work, but you can get a lot of value out of that flexibility. The other thing that I notice is a lot of the things that you end up automating in large companies is stuff that the employees actually don't like so much. And what they get in small companies, it's a very personal touch. Yes, it's manual and it takes a while, but they can actually go talk to a person and say, I didn't get this done properly this month. Can you help me get that sorted? Or I actually need this person on my team to go on holiday and the timeline doesn't quite match what our system. Can you help me solve that? A lot of that personal touch is really valued from a cultural and retention point of view. So it really made me question that, to rush to automation as a first solution, and to pace, what do I automate first and what does bring to the company first? If you go to the next one. So another thing that I was told or believed as I walk into the business is that making a transition in systems is painful and you have to do it for the longer term. And it's funny that on the other side of that is a lot of companies that join our portfolio think that everything Unilever has is better. Can I just get what Unilever has? It's a big system. It must be better. Can I just upgrade for it? And I actually think that couldn't be further away from the truth. The systems really, they need to be fit for purpose. Some of the systems that Unilever has as such a large company, they're made to deal with the complexity of being very global and with like different laws and different payment systems in every single country. And with that, they actually sometimes lose the flexibility, and they can be very tough for a small company to operate on. So even within my portfolio of companies, I have companies that have like only 50 employees or 70, and companies that have 1,000. The systems that they need are very different from each other, actually. The global complexity that they have is also very different. So what I would really advocate for is that the investment that you make is fit for purpose, and that you shouldn't be afraid that you're going to have to change again in a couple of years. First of all, some of the smaller systems are more flexible, they're more customizable, and sometimes they actually are cheaper also than what the big companies pay. And with that, you can feel not as bad having to change again in 3 years or in 2 years, knowing that you get a better ROI for that 2 years, and then you invest again as you go through the next stages of growth without taking away the capability that you actually need for right now. The other thing that I would say is, I observe these companies, I've been doing this job for a little bit over 2 years now, and the interesting thing is they change so much from when they have 50 employees to when they have 100 employees, and they're in 2 countries to where they're in 5 countries. So much they change as they go through like this fast accelerated cycles of growth, that I think is more important that you retain the flexibility to change as the company changes than make an investment for the long term. And sometimes with some of the smaller systems, they can grow with you. You can get better customer support to change and adapt as you go, or you can just more happily and without too much regret just say, now it's time to move on to something different because my company has grown a lot. Then the third thing, if you can flip me over to the next one, is that a good company runs independently from their people. Like if you lose a person, everything still gets done the next day. And of course, resilience is important, don't get me wrong. So you do want to make sure payroll gets made, payroll is met, even if your payroll person is not there the following month. That's true, you don't want to not pay people. But it doesn't necessarily come from very well-established process. Like there's resilience in people, there's backups, there's other things that you can think about. And this idea that your process runs well, even if you plug one person out and plug one other person in, I don't think that's true. And to be honest, I don't think that's true for big companies as well. What I have seen to be even more important in small companies is that if you have great skills and you have great attitude, it makes the whole of difference. And in a very large environment, some variation in that may go unnoticed, but in a very small environment, it makes a lot of difference. And bad leadership in particular, bad skills, bad performance, of course, but bad leadership in particular, it's a poison, no matter how great your processes are. And as a poison, like happiness is contagious, good attitude is contagious, bad leadership is also contagious, but it spreads so quickly in a small company because those leaders touch the whole of the company. It's not like you touch like a little sliver of the company and the other sliver comes and makes up for it. It really spreads quickly and it can poison the well very quickly. So if I were to fix the problems first, I would much rather upgrade talent and fix bad leadership issues rather than make the processes run independently from them. Because I think that actually makes the impact of that is much amplified. Then if you can go into my last one, which also has to do with people, like I started with systems, but I'm kind of like transitioning to people. In HR in particular, it's also been interesting because as I take an X-ray of the teams that I have in each one of these 9 companies, some of them are more evolved in the sense that they have a people operations person, they have an L&D person, they may have a specialized recruitment team or person. And that's a little bit of what I always believed a really great HR team would look like. And what I also now, I'm coming to a much more flexible point of view on that, because again, the growing companies, they change so much. And what you need in different stages of growth is different. In the smaller companies, the reality is they probably cannot afford to have all of these things. And then having flexibility in the talent, it becomes very important. And I'm not going to advocate to say that a person who's specialized in something and a person who's not specialized in something and is doing 4 things at once, they're going to have the same skill set. I don't think that's possible. But that flexibility can really help that small company cover a lot more of their emerging needs as the company grows. To me, then the key question becomes, what are the real growth enablers that the company will really need to actually grow? Which very often, by the way, is recruitment, which is the first place I would say, if you're going to have a specialized team or person, make sure you're recruiting the right people and that you have a path to recruit that's short, because it becomes a real cost driver for the company, but also a performance driver for the company to make sure you have the right people. The other thing that's been interesting to learn as I talk to the HR teams in this company is that a lot of people are attracted to the small companies because of that learning, because they get to do everything. So people are attracted to big companies because they get to learn from really established, best practice, top-notch way of doing things. It becomes a little bit of a school. That's how I came to Unilever and how I came to learn from Unilever in the 18 years that I was working in the main business. In the small companies, the value proposition is different. You get to do a little bit of everything. You get to be very close contact with the business. And that flexibility is really attractive because it teaches people a lot of different things, and it helps even young talent realize what it is that they really want to do and whether they want to specialize in something. So I think there's a lot of value in that as well, and that's what I learned. So to summarize a little bit before I go for conclusions or questions, which by the way, you're more than welcome to disagree with me. I disclaimed what my perspective was. So hopefully during Q&A, you can also just openly say, I don't agree with you. My perspective is a little different. This is what I learned, and complement this as well. So if you go I have a little bit of a kind of summary in the next chart. This is a little bit of the questions that I come with when we're talking about what do I do next? How do I prioritize my HR effort in this fast growth companies? I ask myself, is this a people issue or is it really a system process issue? Because there's no amount of process that's going to solve if the company has poor leadership or poor talent. So while processes are important, systems are important, if there are people issues in the company, I'd rather solve them first. Because again, it's contagious and it really drives the growth wheel of the company. The other thing I ask myself is, where there's really a value for the company? What does unlock a real growth culture? And how does HR more add value in that sense from the business? So it's, in my experience, has been typically making sure we're hiring great people and the right people for the jobs. It's making sure people are getting good performance feedback and then getting coaching and they're getting support to continue to growth, and making sure you have the right leaders in the right roles. And then, which is interesting because usually the way we approach HR as the company starts to establish is formalizing the most fundamental processes first. But those are just, we go for the hygiene first, actually, instead of going for the growth first. And I'm really challenging my businesses to solve some of the growth unlocks versus just solving the hygiene issues. And then you ask yourself, like, okay, how much money do I have in the budget for this year? Where do I spend it? And again, my lens is very similar to the question before, which is, where do I help the business grow faster? Because basically, if the business grows faster, you're going to get a bigger budget next year, a bigger budget next year, a bigger budget next year. And one of the things that is a real risk for a fast growth business is to outpace the growth with the spending, because then you get into the opposite wheel, which is you overspending, you compromise the profitability, and then your ability to fund more investments for next year gets compromised. So the pacing is really important. Having the right business plan in place that allows you to invest in the right pacing, it's really critical. And then I cannot understate the partnership between HR and finance to make sure you get the pacing right. And then finally, how long should this last? I would say don't overcommit. The fast growth spaces are very volatile. They change a lot. So if you feel like this is not going to be a decision that is going to last for like a large number of years, I wouldn't hold myself back for it, because shorter term investments that keep your options to invest in other places, to growth, to respond to changes, to respond to market, also help you pace the investment as well, and help you make better decisions as new information from the market and from the company comes. So that's a little bit of kind of like my logic. Would love to open for questions, for agreements, for disagreements, from complementary views. I'm definitely not super experienced in this space, so anything also you have to teach and to share with the group would be more than welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Tati, for such an insightful presentation. As a reminder, audience members can still enter questions, and we'll go ahead and review a few that came through. This first question asks, how do you convince a company that is very cost conscious to invest in systems that will last when often these are more expensive since you pay for what you get?
It's interesting. What I've seen in the market, it depends a little bit on the country and how evolved the country is. Some of my companies are Europe-based. I'm talking to you from London at the moment. A lot of my companies are US-based. Actually, there's a lot of systems today that are actually pay as you go. Not to say that the investment is irrelevant, by the way, the investments are relevant. But if, to me, they feel like less of a commitment, because it's software, almost everything these days is software as service. You can sign up for a year, you can do pilots. So I think some of these things feel to me less threatening today than they used to be, because you're basically committing for less of a lifetime than what used to be. I remember we did like Workday implementation, relatively recent, within my memory time with Unilever. It was massive. It was like 2 days worth of work. 2 years worth of work, massive amount of team members involved. Surely it was expensive. I don't know how much, I don't need to know. And I'm implementing some HRIS for some of the smaller companies. And it's like 100, 200 employees, super customizable, software as service. The contract's a year. I don't like it, I move. Of course, I don't want to keep moving every year because it's also work for us and we don't want to waste the effort. But it's a lot less threatening. The investment is less, is the setup. Like some of the systems, the setup is about $20,000, $30,000, and then you pay as you go. And it might feel a little bit more wasteful that way, but it gives me that flexibility. And in a fast growth business, I think that's important. So hopefully I'm not repeating myself too much.
Excellent, thank you. This next question does ask if you have any thoughts on hybrid work versus returning to the office, especially in this new year.
It's a very controversial topic. We have these discussions with employees constantly, and obviously there's adamant views on both sides. I can tell you what we are doing and a little bit on, it's interesting because we have 9 companies, so there's a little bit of a differing style also from some of the companies. We're going hybrid, and then what hybrid means across the 9 companies is a little bit different. You'll see a little bit of, small companies take a lot of the personality of the founder or the CEO as well, and what they believe it's right for the company. So our belief as a company, and that goes both for Unilever and for our Unilever Prestige division, is that some interaction is important. You need some sort of creative spark and some interaction and some sort of culture that is based on relationship. And I can imagine this, like I think back on my first year in my Unilever career, how hard would that have been without actually being able to reach out to a person in the office? Like how hard it would be those relationships to be formed. So I think it's a little dangerous for somebody who established in a company to look back on the company and say, we can all do our jobs fully remote. Because I think the culture and the onboarding of the people will erode over time. And then it will be massive effort to then undertake that back. So I do think personally, I'm a fan of hybrid, because the flexibility it brings is invaluable and is an attractive proposition for employees. And I don't think anyone who doesn't give employees flexibility will be able to attract people in the new world that we're living in. But I think it's very dangerous for a company to go fully remote, unless, and there's a caveat to that, if the type of product or service they do is also a fully remote product or service. So I think there's ways to actually bring people together. It doesn't require necessarily people to be in the office like every week or every day. It's just a matter of intentionality. So some of our companies are a little bit more virtual than others. So instead of saying like it's 3 times in a week in the office, they say actually once a month we all come together, and then everybody needs to come, and we do events that once a month, because that's the culture forming event. Another company, for example, that has a lot of fully remote employees in their staff, they have a mandate that every time a leader travels, they have to go to places where employees are and then congregate the employees on that place, so the employees have a network where they are. So I think if you're going, the more remote you go, the more intentional you have to be about preserving culture and about helping new people form relationships, and then a little bit of sparking that creativity and that collaboration with the right remote tools. Personally, I'm very happy with hybrid, and that's what we're doing as well for Unilever and for Unilever Prestige.
Excellent, thank you. It looks like we have time for a couple more questions. What is the biggest misconception about HR that you've seen in your experience?
Ooh, it's a difficult one. I've seen so many. Let me take a little bit of a detour for that question, and if I don't answer, please protest and come back. I think what scares me a little when talking to HR, and this actually happens in small companies a lot, so it's something that I try to compensate for a lot, is that the operation of HR as a separate specialty detracted from the business. And I think what happens is HR is a specialty, is a function that needs to be respected, right? So it's not the same way we respect finance or we respect supply chain. It's different specialty, and it requires education, it requires practice, it requires experience. And I think in the effort of HR professionals establishing that expertise and make sure that expertise is respected, not enough effort goes into connecting that expertise to what the business really needs. And I see a lot of HR professionals not spending enough time and effort in really getting deep into the business. And there's some dangers in that. So imagine you have a recruitment team that report to you, or you're in the recruitment team, and you're trying to make sure you're hiring really great e-commerce talent, which we are a lot. If you don't understand how e-commerce operates, if you don't understand the difference between running your own site or selling through Amazon or selling on Sephora.com, which we do a lot, and how the different financial models work and what different skill sets are required to do each one of those things, how can you hire the right person? Or how can you make sure you're putting in front of the hiring managers people who are really good for the job? and how can you actually be leading, pushing the capability of the business even forward more, accelerate the capability of the business if you don't understand what the business really does. So I would argue there's a balance. You want to spend a lot of time developing your expertise as an HR professional and gaining respect from the business for the expertise that only you have, but also making sure you get respect from understanding how to connect that with the business and what the business really needs. It was a little, I'm not sure I responded to that question on what you really intended, but hopefully it helped.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Tati. That is all the time we do have for questions, but I do want to thank you again for such an excellent keynote presentation. I also wanted to thank everyone who joined us for this session today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be made available on demand following the event.
Thank you, everybody.
Again, Tati. Thank you.
Thank you.